to Clamp, the weekly podcast where we discuss all things related to creating, living, and making projects. I'm your host, Grant Alexander, and joining me as always is Jessy Ratfink and Adam Mackey. And today we're going to be talking about the accessibility of 3D printing.
Yeah. So this is something I've been thinking about a lot. For anyone that watches Survivor, this season there has been a lot of drama about 3D printing, which is not something I expected to get from Survivor. So basically, there is a contestant on the show named Carson who is just a beautiful little Harry Potter angel baby. I love him. But he downloaded, files for puzzles, 3D printed them, and then he was able to solve those puzzles on Survivor very quick. And the only reason he's able to do this is because Survivor reuses the same thing over and over and over, which I think is honestly a bigger problem than how accessible or easy it is to get into 3D printing. But there has been a lot of discussion online about it from people who are not in the maker community that I have found really interesting. There are definitely people out there that still think that 3D printing is something that costs thousands of dollars and is not really available for consumers to buy. I sort of wanted to talk about the different types of 3D printers and how easy it is to get into it, favorite slicers, favorite software to design stuff, all of that good stuff. Get really deep into 3D printers. So yeah, speaking of that, what 3D printers do y'all have?
We have the same printer, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Ender 3.
Are y'all the S1? Oh,
No,
the Pro. Okay.
Yeah, we're old school and cheap. We have just the when I bought mine, you could get the Ender 3 and the Ender 3 Pro for the same price, and I just went, why would anyone buy the Ender 3? When there's a Pro, and then there was 17 other versions that made Pro sound bad. But I don't know. Their naming convention over at Ender or Creality is really nonsensical. It's about as useful as BMW's naming convention, where it used to be the size of car, so 3 Series, 5 Series, 7 Series. Each number got bigger car, and then the numbers afterwards for a very, very short period reference the size of the engine. So if you had a 320, you had a 2-liter. If you had a 325, you had a 2.5 liter. If you had a 535, you had a 3.5 liter engine. Easy. If you had an I, it was fuel injected. If you had a D, it was diesel. And that all got thrown out the window when they introduced turbos. Well, it got thrown out the window way before that, but it really got screwed up when they introduced turbos, because you could have the exact 3-liter engine and a 3-liter engine, and one produced twice as much power. So that's an aside. So the 330 and the 335 were not, one wasn't a 3.5 liter. That's all I wanted to say. back to 3D printers.
Yeah, so I also have kind of a cheaper one. I have the Creality Ender V2, but I've done a bunch of upgrades to it, which is something that we can talk about here in a second. Because the next sort of topic I wanted to move on to is, what are the biggest hurdles when it comes to 3D printing? And for me, I think that's cost and then knowledge. Is there anything else that y'all can think of that might prevent people from getting into 3D printing?
My biggest issue I've ever had with 3D printing was actually getting the printer to work right. They're supposed to work out of the box, but they never do. I've had a lot of trouble with mine. I know some people are lucky and they have no trouble at all, but I've had a lot of issues with mine. A lot of it was probably myself doing the wrong thing or buying cheap parts. I replaced the hot end with a cheap one off eBay, and that failed miserably. And I bought a cheap BL Touch, an off-brand one. It didn't work at all. And I didn't tell myself that it was an issue with what I was buying. It was an issue with the printer. As soon as I upgraded and bought the proper brands of everything, it all worked flawlessly.
Yeah.
So I would say the biggest hurdle that it hasn't been mentioned yet is misinformation online.
Yeah.
That's fair.
right?
Yeah.
Like people send you down like complete, like there are people out there who go enders are garbage or complete garbage, never buy one. And it's like, because they had the same issues that Adam had. Like they didn't build it right. They didn't do the thing. Like I can get, when I built it, the first time I put it together, and I have extensive experience building things from the hobby industry and building models and like following instructions, wrote instructions. Like I did an entire course on instructions, so I tend to be pretty good at it. I built it wrong because the instructions were garbage.
Mm.
Right. But then I put it together and I looked at it and I went, no, this isn't the way it's supposed to go.
Yeah, I had a similar issue with mine. I think it took like a week to build the damn thing because everything went wrong. It was just, yeah, it was the most frustrating experience. Like, I don't think it's ever been that hard to make something for me, but I rebuilt it, I think, 4 times before
Oh,
it
wow.
actually started working properly. I was about to like throw in the towel and try another brand of 3D printer. It was, yeah. Thanks, Creality.
So I could definitely, if you have no experience at all and you have limited even making experience and you're thinking about getting a 3D printer, and if you don't want to tinker, don't get an ender. Like just don't.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and so I basically sort of divided printers into 2 categories in my mind, which is like lower cost and DIY, where they come in kits, and then the higher cost, where it's, it comes to you fully assembled. It costs a shit ton. Like they're normally over 1,000, and they come, with like a complete enclosure, and everything is a little bit easier. Like I was honestly considering going that way after fighting with my Ender 3 for so long, but decided to just stick it out because I wasn't sure that 3D printing was something I was going to do all the time. And I think I would have felt guilty buying like a $1,200 printer if I didn't use it a lot. So yeah, the Ender just made more sense to me at the time. But yeah, with all the shit that Enders get, I still think they're kind of the gold standard, if you will, for like DIY printer kits, just because they are so moddable and there are so many accessories that are, compatible with them. So like for me, I upgraded the build plate. I upgraded and added a CR Touch Z probe so that I wouldn't have to mess with leveling every time. Changing the firmware on it, I think that's something that a lot of people don't think about, but there's so many firmwares out there that are awesome. So
There's so many that aren't, though.
There are a lot of garbage ones,
which is a big issue as well. Yeah, it's a big issue as well because people like myself kept putting firmwares on that everyone said was fine on like Reddit and stuff, and they were so shit, and I didn't know what was wrong with my printer, but it was just the firmware. As soon as I got that, like someone sent me a good firmware on our Discord, and it printed the most perfect print I've ever had.
Yeah.
So I went to the Creality website and I got the newest firmware and I put it on, and that's all I had to do. And I haven't experimented with any firmware outside of it. It's worked great for me. I agree the Z probe was something that made life a lot easier because like I was, playing with the little knobs, adjusting it, and like definitely got a little too close on one of the test programs because I was just like playing around with it, and it embedded. Like if you watch anyone who's got an Ender, they have all their prints are embedded into the build plate. And as soon as it looked like that, I took that build plate and I put it aside and I bought a brand new build plate because I was like, this shouldn't be like this. And then I did it again. And then so I went and got a PEI or PIE, whatever it is. PEI.
I think it's PEI.
PEI.
Yeah. Well, in Canada, we have a province called PEI. So I was like, is it really the same as the province? But apparently it is. I got a PEI build plate from this place that makes them in Toronto, and 3D Hub. And as soon as I got that, everything became just so much easier. Nothing, as soon as it cools down, you like touch the print and it pops off.
Yep.
And it used to be like you'd have to like, I never scraped because I scraped one of my build plates and it looked like shit afterwards. And I was like, I'm never using this scraper ever again, and threw it in the garbage. Right. But now I just like, if you have a tall one, you could just blow it over. You just go, and it just like falls off the build plate. You're like, this is wonderful.
Well, I was saying that with the insert that I had to make for my microphone arm, and I bumped it in mid print, and I had to hold it there for 5 minutes while it finished the print because one little touch and it came off.
Oh, so the PEI, the one build plate I have, if it's not cool, it doesn't unstick. It's amazing. Right. So sometimes you're like, oh, I'll wait till the print's done. And, it's like, oh, it's 99%. I'll just wait here so I can start the next one. And it's like, no.
Well, this actually, because I had a...
Come back in 10 minutes.
Is it a raft? Is it a raft that's the whole, like it prints a whole sort of puddle for it to sit on?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it actually broke off the top of that, not off the actual plate.
Oh, no.
Because I've got a PEI plate as well.
Okay.
And the support thing on the bottom.
Oh, I got you. Yeah. Well, I never use a raft. Well, why don't we talk a little bit about that? But that seems like a good segue to talk about the type of support you use, because there's like a raft is like as if it's floating on top, so it's not connected to the build plate. I have never ever used that, and I don't understand why you would.
I generally use a skirt unless it's something fine like that. I was like the insert was tall but really thin. So I
use a raft or a brim?
Probably brim.
Or a skirt, because they're three different things. So a skirt.
So skirt's the one that just has a line on the outside, like a circle around it?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And then brim is what's a brim?
A brim is it takes that line and fills lines all the way into it. So it goes in a circle, keeps going around until it hits the part. And basically there is a brim at the top of your thing. So if you're doing a really tall one, a brim makes sense. It'll connect it outside of it. Mm-hmm. A brim's also good if you're doing something nice and wide and you're afraid it's going to lift off the edges.
Yeah, so brim then.
All right. And then a raft, it actually builds a raft underneath it as the first layer. So the raft is connected and then it's connected to the raft.
Right.
So it's as if it's one layer up.
So I think I did raft for the insert, but I usually do brim or skirt.
Cool. Depending on what it is. Jessy, what do you do?
Almost always skirt. I don't know. I haven't really had any issues with adhesion, so the less amount of stuff that I have to remove at the end, the happier I am.
Yeah. And I've watched a lot of different makers make things on 3D printers, and they're often like jabbing screwdrivers into their support structure and talking about how great their 3D printing is, and then jabbing a screwdriver in it. And I just go, what are you doing? When I get done with, if I have supports to because I needed a support, it was too big to whatever I'm printing, I can generally just pop them out unless it's really big. But I never have a problem with support material being stuck on the inside. It almost is as smooth as if it was on the build plate. But other people seem to have a lot of problems.
I've definitely had problems, but I honestly don't normally print things that require any sort of extra help. Just because I have had some issues with supports. I downloaded sort of a tool holder that is compatible with the Ender 3v2, and that one for the different tool holders, it had all sorts of support in them, and it was so tiny, so I ended up going to Amazon and buying a set of craft knives so that I could cut through all of it and get it out, because it wasn't coming out with any tool that I had at the time.
Oh wow.
So I need to learn more about supports and how to actually use them well, because I'm not doing that right now at all.
I was surprised at how much. So I started playing around with how far can my printer go without a support, and I was surprised at how far it can go. Especially if you have a 45 degree, you can go infinite without support. It was amazing to me how well it worked. And it's really only across flats that you really need support. When I was making my air hockey table thing. It's such a complicated part that I had to split it into 3. So it needed supports everywhere. And yeah, I don't know. I see a lot of people like talking about, my 3D printing is so great because I didn't need to use supports and blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't really care if I use supports or not, but maybe I'm like in a minority. I feel it's like people like talking about, I hand cut these dovetails. I didn't use a router. I hand cut these ones. And I'm like, who cares?
There's definitely like some pride because, in 3D printing, there's only so much that you can sort of finagle to make things better. And so, yeah, I think that some people, it is a very big point of pride that they can print complex models without supports and they don't require a lot of like post processing. But I don't know. I personally would kind of really like to print something huge with tree supports, just once to try it out because it looks really cool to me, and I do I do want to see how well it works.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say that I've seen some people who are like Other Dog Designs once he's got his printer dialed in and he's been printing I think his printer's been nonstop printing since he owned it, other than the few times he's been at work and a print is finished.
Oh my gosh.
And the things that pop out of his printer and the way they look once they've popped out is insane. Like, they are ready to be displayed and you don't even have to do anything. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. I guess everything I do is like functional. So the post processing, I'm like, do I need to glue 2 pieces together? Other than that, I'm good to go, right? Like,
yeah, no, that's fair. I think that, yeah, I definitely fall into that too. Everything has just had like one purpose. It just needed to be, functional. It didn't need to be pretty or anything. So yeah, I definitely haven't spent a lot of time like tweaking my slicer settings or anything, even though I did fall down a rabbit hole a couple months ago on YouTube about slicer settings and checking out everyone's presets for PLA. I did get really sucked into that. But speaking of that, what slicer do y'all use?
I use, what is this? Creality something.
Oh, okay. So the
slicer.
standard Creality. Okay.
Yeah. So the standard Creality is Cura Slicer, for those who don't know. It's just a branded Cura Slicer that has some presets from Ender. And obviously is like a couple versions older because that's how you get branded. If you want branded stuff of a product, you can always get the newer non-branded version. I also use the Creality one because it's always worked for me. It's slow. There are I know I could be printing faster if I wanted to, but I generally press a go print and go to work or go to sleep.
Yeah.
I actually have settings that I got off a guy on YouTube that prints ridiculously fast.
Yeah,
depending on what I'm printing, I'll switch between. Yeah.
No.
What
do you use, Jessy?
I use Prusa Slicer.
Oh,
yeah. I like the interface a lot more than Cura, and I feel like it has more options. When we were talking about ironing in another episode recently, and y'all didn't know what that is, there's some stuff that is exclusive to Prusa, which I really like. So yeah, I did use Cura at first, but I don't know. I just didn't like it that much. It crashed a lot for me. So I was like, I need to find something else.
I've never had an issue with
it. It might honestly be because I'm Mac. Yeah.
Oh, right. That's your problem.
Yeah. So it could be that problem. Yeah, I'm not sure, but Prusa works beautifully on Mac. So yeah, I think I'm going to keep doing that one. Well, and I guess this can kind of bring us to the next 2 questions I had, which is, do y'all think you need 3D design experience to start 3D printing?
I think technically no, but it definitely helps if you want to print your own custom stuff. But there are so many websites you can download prints from.
Yeah.
I would say it depends on what you want to 3D print.
Yeah.
right? If you want a 3D printer to print off little knickknacks, no, you don't need any, right? If you want a 3D printer to solve problems in your house, it is highly likely that you will need at minimum
Yeah.
Tinkercad level of design ability, but probably something a little more than that to be able to design an actual solution as opposed to just I don't know, doing something that doesn't work.
Yeah. I think
Hoping
I
someone
agree
else
with
has the
that.
design.
Mhm. The only thing I think about though is that even so, Thingiverse, printables, Cults 3D, what is the other things? Like there are a lot of like
Mm-hmm.
file repositories out there, but I guess the reason why I'm kind of happy I have a little bit of 3D design experience is that sometimes those files just don't work and
Right.
require modifications. I think that's kind of one of the most frustrating parts about it is it all seems like it would be really easy and someone's already made it for you, but the file could be corrupted or, like the G code that you get is real wonky and doesn't quite work with your machine. Like there are so many issues you can hit. And so I always wonder if someone doesn't have 3D design experience, would that just be like a stop for them?
I could not in a million years will I ever download someone else's G code.
Same.
Unless that's the only thing available and I really, 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 really want that thing. Otherwise,
Yeah.
it takes 2 seconds to make my own G code with the slicer
Mm-hmm.
and I can change around any of the parameters.
Mm.
Right? Like, I don't understand why anyone, I get why you might I put the G code when I upload to printables.
Mm-hmm.
I put G code because it's a thing I can put in. I say I'm Ender 3 with these, settings or whatever, but I just don't understand someone who would download that and not the STL or 3MF file.
Yeah, I don't know either. Yeah, because I definitely never really go like G code first. I did it twice at the very beginning for test prints, which I guess that's really the only useful case for me is if it's like a test sprint, you can grab someone's G code and see how things go. But yeah, I don't think I would want to do that for just something random on Thingiverse. I'd rather look at the model and slice it myself, see how it looks.
Yeah. I
And I
don't know.
guess so. Talking about designing, do y'all have preferred software for doing that?
Well, even talking about designing and bringing it into downloading your own models, oftentimes I'll download a model as a starting point for my design. So,
Yeah.
if you guys are watching at home or watching this on YouTube, I downloaded a case for a GoPro camera and turned that into I cut it in half so that it fit over. I could just shove my GoPro into it, and then added some sticks on the front of it so it sits on my monitor. Right, so it just sits nicely on my monitor. But I didn't want to design the whole contours of the GoPro case when I know someone out there
Yeah.
has already done it, right?
Yeah. I
So
do that too.
I to bring it into what did I use to do that? I imported it all into Fusion 360, and I've since I took but I like to make stuff, 3D, not 3D Fusion for
Fusion
Makers
360.
course. Yeah, it was since I took that I've never looked at another software because
Oh.
I don't want to confuse myself by learning. I don't use them enough to warrant learning a whole bunch of different softwares. Like when I was in university,
Yeah.
I did AutoCAD, but that was a long time ago, and I don't think I could design anything again in AutoCAD. And then I picked up SketchUp, but I don't know how I would use SketchUp to make the 3D models I make the way I make them in Fusion. What I really liked about Fusion is that the way you think, you can do an operation that way, depending on what it is. But if you want to make a different profile, if you go to the Bob's, the I Like to Make Stuff course, they have a free section at the intro that shows 4 different ways of making the same shape based on one's a revolution, the other's carving it, and it's just 4 different ways of making the same thing based on how
Yeah.
you think. And I went, this is how this works for me, because I often think in ways that the software says, sorry, bud, you can't do that.
Oh, well, and that sounds really nice. I might have to look into that course. I'm checking it out right now. 120 is not bad, really.
Yeah.
But so
If you go
I
become a
was
patron of
oh,
them,
sorry.
you can get a discount.
Oh, okay, nice.
If you become a patron of us, there's no discount.
Yeah, we aren't fancy enough. I know that Fusion 360 offers an official learn Fusion 360 in 90 minutes course,
Oh,
but that
wow.
one just didn't. I don't know. It seemed a lot more dry and not as focusing on the different ways of thinking about how to do it. It seems like it's more just one straight workflow instead of giving you options. So yeah,
Well, that's
I
the
like to
thing.
make
Like,
stuff when it sounds better.
Fusion 360 is not really made for makers or what we're trying to do. So that when they do courses of how to use the program and stuff, they're not thinking the same way that we think of what we're trying to build. And like heaps of people use Fusion 360. I use Fusion 360 for everything as well. And like even for CNC work and stuff, it's not made for that. It has the ability to make the G code and stuff, but it's definitely not made to make the G code. Like the program doesn't run in the sense of
Not for
the
a 3D
workflow to
printer.
get, not for 3D printing and not for CNC.
Oh, for my CNC, it works wonderful.
It does, but it's not. It only for general tasks, really. Like there's no option to sort of do inlays or that sort of stuff. It's more of just making toolpaths.
I don't know. I think
I can't say I've used it for that.
I think maybe you there's two things. There's different things that are available if you pay, and I don't know if that's something that's available. And it's also, there's a lot to Fusion that if you don't know, you don't know.
True.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's so many extensions and plugins and so much stuff.
Hashtag not
but yeah,
sponsored. But
hashtag not sponsored, though I work for the company. I still mostly do everything in Tinkercad, and I sort of do the thing that you said, Grant, where if I'm thinking about something that I know someone else has already made, I will just mash up something in Tinkercad. So I made THC stamps for cookies for Tyler's work. And I found an ergonomic handle on Thingiverse and then designed the stamp head in Tinkercad and just mushed them together. And it worked pretty good.
There you go.
But now that I've had an intro to Fusion 360, I think I might start looking more at it because to me, it feels more like drawing when you're starting, which is easier. Tinkercad now, I don't know if anybody's heard, but we've got a new feature called cruising, so that you basically you can just stack the shapes on top of each other. You're not dragging shapes into shapes anymore, so it makes it easier to get good placement for everything. But I still think I probably need to update and be an adult and use Fusion 360.
Yeah, I couldn't. So I tried. There was one Instructables that had a extra use Tinkercad to design this project, and you get there's an extra different prize. And I went,
the judge's prize.
Yeah, there's a judge's prize just for that. And I went, well, I designed it in Fusion. How hard could it be in Tinkercad? And I spent an hour, and I was like, this is stupid. And I just shut it down. I went, this is not worth my time. I spent too long already to potentially win a prize in something that's I'm backwards designing something that I already had in the Fusion file, right? So I just uploaded the Fusion file.
I still remember the first time that I started with Fusion 360, and I came from SketchUp as well. It was such a huge learning curve, I feel.
Right.
And I actually thought Fusion was stupid. I thought I could never get it to work right. There's some things even now that just don't work. They're not as simple as they were in SketchUp and stuff. And I never understood why, but I could never look back now. I use Fusion for everything.
Yeah. I want to design. So I have a design of my house in SketchUp. I want to now design my entire house in Fusion. because now Fusion makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And SketchUp doesn't. I can't use SketchUp again. I tried to go back into it. That's my buddy, like for that transmission piece that we printed. He designed it in SketchUp and sent it to me. So I had to like re-download SketchUp. You know, it's really frustrating. And then I had to take that and then I had to export it and then I put it into Fusion so that I could use it. Because I couldn't I was just like, this is no good. I can't use SketchUp again. I don't understand what's happening here. It's
SketchUp is another one that I used like twice and then just never went back to. I don't know. I don't know. It sort of felt like a mix between Fusion and like Corel Draw. So I was just really lost and not quite sure how to use it. So yeah.
I felt it was a lot more like AutoCAD than Fusion.
And that could probably be why I was like AutoCAD. Oh no.
Yeah.
Like my sister, have I told y'all that my sister is a drafter? Like
no.
She got that job, I think, last year, and she exclusively uses AutoCAD, and she sends me and my mom stuff all the time. Like she made drawings of her house and all this stuff, and she's always talking about AutoCAD and how it works and what she's making with it. And I'm always just like, I don't know anything. This is crazy.
Yeah. I think you can do anything in AutoCAD, I think.
That's what it sounds like.
Anything. But I don't think it's the easiest. Like, and that's the same. Like, there's things that are easier in every program. So if something's working for you, it's probably good to stick with it. I just felt like SketchUp wasn't designed for 3D printing. And since that's what we're talking about and the accessibility of it, right? Like I found like if I wanted to modify anything in SketchUp from like an STL file, impossible. I don't even think you can, right? Like.
So I guess the last little thing I wanted to talk about is 3D printing services. Yeah. One of the big things that I got out of the Survivor 3D printing cheating discussion is that not only do people think that printers are crazy expensive, they just don't know of any other ways to get parts manufactured. So I sort of wanted to talk through the different ways that people can do that. There are a ton of companies now online. Back in the day, like a decade ago, there was probably like 3 of them. But there are so many manufacturing companies. And even some of the PCB manufacturers are also offering 3D printing services now. So that's pretty neat because that way, you know, you can get everything for your project from one company, which is pretty awesome. But so I wanted to give a few examples. Ones that either I have used or I know that people have used are Shapeways, iMaterialize, and Hubs. Those are all really good, but the problem with the print manufacturers, they need a lot of information from you. So I guess if you're not super knowledgeable about 3D printing, you might not have the right information for them, or you might have designed it in a way that it's going to print completely off scale. So there can be a lot of back and forth with that. And it can take a while. Some of the companies will be backed out and it'll be like, it'll be a month before you get your print. So there's some definite downsides, but it's gotten a lot cheaper than it used to be. And there are even companies now offering metal and ceramic printing, which I think is awesome because it would be so nice to like send something in and have it come back and have like a piece of jewelry that's totally done. So I kind of want to try that at some point.
I could not imagine not having a 3D printer and sending it out to be printed. Right, could not understanding how they work. Like I could get, you may not like have one that has the capacity or can't do the material you want, but not even if you don't understand how 3D printers work. And we've only talked about FDM ones basically. There's also resin 3D printing. There's all the other types and how they work backwards and stuff like that. But you know, thinking about it, and I just go, I couldn't imagine trying to have a conversation with someone about this is my design. And never having 3D printed, trying to get someone else to 3D print it.
Yeah, that was my biggest question because I always see people sort of in the comments on Instructables. They're always like, "How do I get this? How do I get the parts? I don't have a 3D printer." And people always recommend like a specific service. But then, yeah, I'm left there sitting going, but do they know what to tell the service, how to communicate with them about what they need? And that's where I always get stuck. So, yeah, maybe that is not really even something that people would do. I'm not sure. But I guess there are also a lot of places that you can just buy 3D prints from. Like they have blown up on Etsy. Etsy has become a treasure trove of crap STL prints that you can buy for like $5 to $20. So, I mean, that's also an
I was
option.
wondering, have you seen, because I haven't seen it because I've never looked, but is there a place where you can like, you know, like Morley was doing these 3D printed repairs for strangers? Like he's doing that. Like, is there a place where you can like submit online a broken piece or I need this design to fit these specs and they'll design it and 3D print it for you? Do you know of anything like that?
Oh, that's something I haven't heard of, but now I'm very curious if it actually exists. So yeah, if anybody knows of one, tell us, because that's
like there would
actually
be
an
a lot
interesting
of
idea.
I feel like there'd be a lot of I don't know what the
Back
word
and
would
forth.
be, but like not back and forth, but like if you don't measure your part properly and they go off your spec, like who's at fault there and what? I feel like there'd be a lot of like people being like, I told you what I need and you didn't print me the right thing.
Yeah, well, that's anyone who does any CNC manufacturing for anyone. Like, if you give me a spec, like if you don't understand how to do the specs, it becomes a problem. Like, this is why, like there's always a middleman between the person doing the actual job and the person who's like that person talks to the customer so that the people doing the job don't have to. It's because the person who talks to the customer understands both people, right? It was like the guy in Office in the movie Office was the Office Space, where he was like, well, I talk to the customers so that the engineers don't have to, right? And he made his job seem like they made his job seem completely and utterly meaningless. But in reality, without him, they would probably not be able to do anything because most programmers can't. Well, not all. Like, there's a lot of people don't understand the lingo of the other world they're not in, right? Like, if you don't understand the world that they're operating in, there's so much terminology and understanding and what do you mean by this and all that people will just take assumptions and or measure things wrong or the deliverables aren't what they mean and there's no clarification on what you need, right? So, yeah.
So I started searching after you asked if there are people that do it, and I'm finding a lot of people on Etsy who are advertising professional 3D printing services, but I think those folks are more give me a link to an STL and I'll do it for you. Like this guy that I'm looking at, it's $40 per hour for design work if you don't have a file.
Oh, that's pretty
so
good.
Maybe, but yeah, I guess like Etsy and Fiverr might be good places to look for stuff like that. But I do wonder how hard it would be to kind of go back and forth with someone to get something. Not sure.
Yeah.
I think a point we also didn't make is like people always just assume, I don't know if that's the right word, but like that you're just 3D printing a finished sort of project of like that's what you want, whereas not just like 3D printing tools to help you with your process. Like a lot of people make
or a prototype.
Prototyping. A lot of people make stamps for like stamping into like leather, like leather keychains and.
Yeah, definitely. This doesn't seem like a good time to do that, but because we haven't talked about maker spaces. But thanks for trying. Thanks for trying to get us to move us on. Right. But I don't want to move on yet.
I'm going to be honest. Just quickly. I can cut this out. I'm going to be honest. I came home sick from work today and I felt fine like after I had a sleep and I'm quietly dying. So I'm trying to get us to move on.
No.
Okay. Well, we'll quickly talk about maker spaces. because I think it's really important to talk about, like, there's a lot of libraries have 3D printers. A lot of schools have 3D printers.
Yep.
And when we're talking about accessibility and how accessible 3D printing is, I think it's really important to highlight the fact that if you're looking, you can find it. Now, they're not available yet in like Home Depot. Aisle 22 is the 3D printing aisle. But if you go to a computer store, like I went to when I got my laptop, I got new RAM for my laptop. They had 3D printers and filament on the shelf.
Yep.
And the filament was the same price as Amazon.
Yeah.
So it's like, do I support Amazon or go to my local place? And of course, Amazon delivers. So I'm sorry. It's so funny. But that's one thing I wanted to talk about is if you want to find it, it's like anything. If you start looking, you'll understand. But a lot of people make assumptions, right? And that's that whole accessibility problem is people make assumptions about whether or not, like when people look at the tools in my garage, they go, "Oh my God, how do you have a forge?" I'm like, the forge is the cheapest. Like you're looking around, the forge is the cheapest one of all the tools that I have in my garage. Like, why is the forge the thing that everyone's so amazed by? Right?
Yeah. Well, and I think I have a very sort of sunny outlook on 3D printing because, yeah, I work for the Tinkercad social media channels. And so I see so many teachers who have kids in elementary school who are 3D printing stuff that they've designed. And that just amazes me that
Yeah.
can you imagine doing that in school? It blows my mind that now kids are actually learning 3D design, 3D printing, along with other stuff. I don't know. It's really amazing to me, and it makes me so excited to see it.
I remember we all had iMacs. We remember like the different colored iMacs. That was our school got all of them 2 years after they were released, but they finally were able to requisition them, and we got them all. And I hated them because the mouse was a single big giant clicky thing. I fucking hated it. But you know what I don't hate?
Our patrons.
Patreons.
You're right. I especially want to thank our F-Clamp level patrons, Vincent Ferrari from Digitally Creative, Scott from Dad It Yourself DIY, Joe Herdina, Rich from Lauren Designs, David Wood from DW Wood Builds, and everyone else who supports us there. Everyone gets access to the pre-show, after-show. We also have a Discord now that is up and running and has a patron-only thing where we do a monthly hangout, as well as a leather stamped keychain that we use 3D printing to make this keychain. You can find out everything about that at patreon.com/clamp. And you can go there for fun.
CLAMPmendations. All right, my CLAMPmendation for this week is going to be Steve from That Pen Bloke on Instagram. Is a local Aussie, makes pens. They're really, really cool. Really nice.
Nice. So mine is another horror thing, as always. This week, I would like to recommend the Evolution of Horror podcast. The host, Mike, is a pleasure to listen to. He's so great. He has on a lot of female guests also, which I get really excited about. Ladies talking about horror. But yeah, it's sort of one of my newer comfort shows that I listen to when I'm doing everything, even sleeping. So yeah, I really enjoy it, and you should check it out. They have a bunch of different seasons of different themes in horror, so there's probably something for everyone on there.
Unless you don't like horror.
Unless you don't like horror, and then what the hell is wrong with you?
Well, so I gotta recommend that everyone go, and if you're going to be 3D printing, the PLA that I have personally had good luck with is Polymaker Pro. I have tried a bunch of different ones, and the Polymaker Pro is the stuff that I have had good luck with when it comes to PLA, which is the standard stuff that most people print in. But I'll say don't cheap out. This is my wisdom advice. I went cheap one time and I was like, wow, that's a great deal. And every single print looked like absolute garbage. So
yeah, it's a hard lesson to learn for sure.
Well, it wasn't that hard. It was a single roll. of cheap, and I went cheap, so it wasn't that expensive. But I could see someone like, oh, I'm really into 3D printing and ordering like 30 rolls of different colors because they're so cheap. And now you have 30 rolls of plastic that's just going to end up in the ocean. So don't do that. Our Ask Us Anything this week is from Austin from High Caliber Craftsman. His question is, what is your pain threshold where you instantly buy something? And when he talks about pain threshold, he's talking about how much money or time where you instantly buy something where you have to think about it in reference to how much it costs. So often when I'm thinking about this, I think about like a workbench. And it's like there's a pain threshold for that because I go, I don't have a lot of time. And you can get such cheap like toolboxes that are just like with wood tops on them for like, they go on sale for like $400. And you're like, it's going to be $300 worth of plywood to make this. Or I can get a metal box with all the drawer slides and everything built into it. Oh, it's really hard to think, what should I do? So I often look at it like my pain threshold is, do I want to make this? And that's it. If I want to make it, I don't buy it. That's it. I don't care if it costs more. I don't look at the money. I go, do I want to make this? Yes or no. If I want to make it, I just buy it. Now, if I can't afford to buy it and I don't want to make it, that's a whole different discussion.
Yeah. I guess I kind of fall under that too, but then I also am still living like I'm in poverty. So I like always question, I think probably $200, like anything below $200, I feel okay like making a very quick decision. But when it gets a little higher, it's always for me a question of, how often am I going to use this? What is this actually going to do for like, I don't know, my well-being, my life? Like, how is this going to improve things for me? Yeah, I have to spend a lot of time sort of talking about, am I actually going to utilize it? Is it really worth it? Just because I've been out of the shop for so long, I think also.
I definitely think a lot. Oh, sorry, go.
I was going to say, I didn't think about the question that way, but it totally makes more sense the way you're answering it than the way I answered it. So I think, that number is still like completely dependent on what it is. If it's a new thing I'm getting into, the number's super low. Like I bought a $35 Amazon kit for leatherworking, and I was like, I'll try that out. And I'm still using it to this day. Right?
Yeah.
But you could buy you could buy a $200 kit. And it would probably be a much nicer kit, but I keep that number super low. And then I'll also like go out and spend a lot of money on something I definitely don't need and instantly buy it. Like the price tag doesn't mean anything at all to me for some reason, for some things. I'm broken. I'm a broken individual. That's all.
I definitely think about what it is and how much I'm going to use it. Like, I've been needing to buy a rattle gun for years, but I just can't bring myself to do it because how often do I really take a wheel off a car?
Right.
Yeah, whereas something like a nail gun that I would use back when I was woodworking a lot, I'd use daily. I'd happily spend $200, $300.
There's definitely like a false economy that people don't realize. Like an air riveter, they can be like $80. But if you install more than 10 rivets, it is worth it 100% of the time. Every time. Buy one. If you're doing more than 10 rivets, do it. They're so much better.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to thank TF Turning. What?
I was just looking them up. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. They're really cool. I want to thank TF Turning for the theme song. If you want to find us, you can find us all collectively on the Clampcast on all the different social media. And until next time, cheers and have a great day.
Bye.
Yeah.